Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, and to anyone who has gone through puberty, because if you've gone through puberty in your life, then this episode is specifically for you. If you've not gone through puberty, click away. You'll find this boring and mundane. But to all of you who have, welcome to the Holy Moment Podcast, a podcast where we talk about films, discuss the moments that work, the moments that don't, and of course, the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. I am Nathaniel John Lirio. I'm an editor based out of Atlanta, a guy that went to film school. While I was at film school, I met my dear, dear friend,
Jeffrey Nichols, at your service, folks. I like acting, I like writing, I like directing. I also love making this podcast with my good friend Nathaniel Lirio, my dear, dear co-host. And it occurs to me that your intro, it would have been right at home at our previous episode too, which is also a coming-of-age movie, Dear Lemon Lima.
Yeah, it's crazy that because every week we spin a wheel to see what movie we picked out of the category. And it's awesome to see that it's 2 weeks in a row now, or 4 weeks in a row. Because 4 weeks ago, we had your category for the hobby, then my category for hobbies, and then your category for coming of age. And now we are the kings of summer, my category for coming of age. That's right, folks. This movie has been on my letter watch box since day one of having Letterboxd. And I think the reason why when I was writing my notes out today, I was like, why did this get on my watch list so early on? And the honest truth is, I think it had a cool poster. I don't think I saw the trailer. I don't think anyone suggested it to me. I think it had a cool poster, and I was like, I'm going to watch this at some point in my life. And I watched it Sunday evening on an airplane, and not the best way to experience a movie. But that is not the movie's fault.
I love it when you can judge a book by its cover. Well, I think more people should, right? I think that they would watch more movies if they were more willing to just take risks like that. Was this a worthwhile risk, Nathaniel?
Oh, was this a worthwhile risk? I think yes. I think there's definitely quite a bit of issues I have with the movie, which we're going to get into. But I think overall, it was a worthwhile risk. It wasn't not going to say a complete pile of dog shit. That's way too strong. It wasn't perfect, but there was a lot of good nuggets that I found within it, and it was a lot of fun comparing it to last week's coming of age, because last week's coming of age was a teenage girl. It was like a 13-year-old girl coming of age movie, and this is a 16-year-old boy coming of age movie. So I thought it was a lot of fun to compare the two genres as I was watching this movie, and had a lot of fun doing that.
I had the same thought. I see this as a redemption episode. I think I was a little too hard on Dear Lemon Lima last episode. And I think that I'm going to maybe talk about Dear Lemon Lima some this time around a little more positively. But but that isn't to say positive in contrast to the terrible movie that is The Kings of Summer, because quite frankly, I enjoyed this movie. I liked it. I think I like it more than Nathaniel does.
Oh, yeah, we'll have to see. And Jeffrey, you'll have a chance, because I don't normally do this, because not normally we have two categories back to back, but a lot of my questions were structured around kind of last week's interpretation of a coming of age and then this week's interpretation of a coming of age movie, and just our opinions on the differencing approach with the director. Speaking of the director for this movie was Jordan Roberts. He's only ever done one other movie, and this was his feature film debut, which made me a lot happier after I found that out. Also made me a lot happier after I found out how much the movie was made for. Guess how much this movie was made for?
Ooh, man. I've never been good at guesstimating numbers. I'm going to say 20 million.
See, that's the whole reason we're doing this podcast. It's really to hone in Jeffrey's ability to be fiscally responsible and figure out how much money movies are made for. No, it was actually made for 1.5 million, which that's insane. Again, 1.5 million. I don't have that in my bank account. I don't think Jeffrey does. But for some of the actors that they have in this, and, it wasn't like crazy locations. I mean, I guess they just really built a shed with random wood in the middle of the woods. But ultimately, $1.5 million is no money when it comes to bigger movies. Also, the other movie he directed more recently was Kong Skull Island, which I hear a lot of people like. I have not seen it. I despise the most recent Kong versus Godzilla movie, which is, I know, in that franchise. I know the King Kong from Skull Island is that same King Kong, and it is top 3 worst movies of all time. It's one of the few movies that left the theaters and went, I think it was pointless in being a film major. I think art is dead and I'm sad. Oh my gosh, I hated it.
That's so interesting. I would not have guessed that because I haven't seen Kong Skull Island, but it feels like a very different movie from what we watched for today's episode.
Yeah, it feels like what Marvel did a few years ago, where they took a lot of indie filmmakers who had one or two popular indie movies, and then they threw a Marvel movie at them, and it was a lot of fun because you could see their indie filmmaking coming through, even though it was still very through a very like cliche Marvel lens. But a few that come to mind was probably one of my favorites in the more recent years for Marvel movies is Shang Chi, who was I think Dustin Cretin. I'm butchering his name, but he did Terminal 12, I believe. That was a short film, then an indie film, and then he got I think he did things in between that, but then he did that movie. And then who is the director that did The Eternals? I think it's the same one. A lot of my film friends loved her. I think it's a female director. And anyways, she also I think has done more indie filmmaking and then has done The Eternals. But the point is, it is interesting how sometimes instead of going with like big directors that they know do well in the box office, they go with a more like indie filmmaker, which I love to see. We appreciate that. That's what Jeffrey and I are, indie filmmakers. So a big fan of that.
I really appreciate them giving voice to these up and coming artists, but I've also heard the argument that they were doing this so that these artists who haven't made as many films, they feel more obligated to give in to studio interference, which I could also see, right? But it's a balance that has to be struck of. Well, yes, these voices are being put out there, and yes, their stories are going to be interfered with, but at least they're making things, right? And this hopefully will be a launch pad to future projects, their own passion projects.
As many things in the Hollywood world, it's a double-edged sword. Last example I'll give of this, and then we'll actually focus on The Kings of Summer. One of my favorite directors of all time, David Lowery. He directed one of my favorite movies, top three, A Ghost Story. He very much does like studio project, indie project, studio project, indie project. So it kind of, he seems like this director, he seems like he's in a position he exactly wants to be in. He'll get to do these more production, these big like production quality studio movies that have a ton of money. So he probably gets to do camera work and work with certain actors and certain locations that he couldn't do on an indie set, but at the cost of probably not having as much creative freedom. And then he gets to go and do his own scripts. He writes them and he works with like indie studios, and so a lot less money, but he gets the complete creative control over everything. In my opinion, that is like the dream. That is the dream as a director, getting to bounce back and forth and not being like a black sheep in one. Like you can't go do Hollywood and then go back to indie, or you can't just do indie and then go to Hollywood. He can go back and forth, which is really cool to see. But all that to be said, go check out David Lowery's movie. Big fan of his. But today, The Kings of Summer. We already talked about, the director, the money, all the fun stuff. So let me give everyone a quick synopsis at home who have not watched this film. Again, it's a coming of age movie. Keep that in the front of your lobe while we're kind of discussing this. The Kings of Summer follows Joe Toy, a teenager still reeling from the death of his mother and suffocating under his father's strict, emotional, distant rules. Desperate for freedom and a place where he can truly be himself, Joe convinces his best friend Patrick and the eccentric Biagio to run away into the woods. Together, they build a house from scraps, determined to live independently and escape the pressures of home. As the boys embrace their wilderness adventure, Joe finds unexpected moments of healing, but tensions rise as jealousy, unspoken grief, and the arrival of a girl begin to strain their fragile world. The cracks in their confront the pain he's been avoiding, teaching him that running away can't erase loss or replace the bonds of family. All right, Jeffrey, the first question I have for you is about our main character, Joe. Now, last week, one of our main issues we had with Dear Lemon Lima was we felt like it failed to dive deep enough into the teenage angst, the depression, the confusion, everything that comes with puberty and your coming of age. You're going from being a girl to a woman. You're going from being a boy to a man. There is something that shifts in you physiologically, spiritually, mentally, all of these things. Something changes. And I feel like we didn't dive enough into Ness's character to really get enough payoffs. We just didn't dive enough into her emotions. For the character of Joe, he's living at home. He's 16. He's kind of scrawny. He's kind of seen as a loser at school. And his dad is this very overbearing, like my house, my rules. You'll do what I say when I say it type of person. The dad is also very clearly reeling from the fact that his mother or his wife had recently died. And it's very clear he doesn't know how to parent without her. And so Joe runs away, goes to the woods, and has this moment of freedom, truly masking the pain of the loss of his mother. Do you feel like this movie, The Kings of Summer, dives enough into the trauma and also just what make Joe ticks for there to be any type of payoff or less more than payoff, any character development with our main character Joe.
I think that they didn't have to completely explore Joe's feelings of grief over his mom as thoroughly as they could have. They didn't have to, because this movie was more about his relationship with his dad and them experiencing this loss together, right? Or really, it's not them going through loss, it's them struggling to connect in light of this new absence. And he seems like a troublemaker, seems like a little shit. He seems like a kid that is willing to do things that garner attention, right? Or if he wants to do something, he'll just do it. Right? I view him as a Ferris Bueller light, because we saw that. Did we see that movie together?
Jeffrey, the joke on the podcast can be that I've never seen movies. You're always like, have you seen this movie? Have you seen this movie? And I'm like, no, I haven't. Stop shaming me. But the joke on the podcast for you is you keep thinking we have or haven't seen movies together, and it's always the opposite. The other day, you're like, oh, we need to watch Hot Rod. And I was like, I've watched it with you in that room. And this time, no, I've never watched the movie, Fuelless Bueller's Day Off.
Well, basically, the shtick is Ferris Bueller does what Joseph does, but with like 10 times the charisma, and everything just sort of works out for him. He's like the cool kid. And I think that Joe is trying to be the cool kid. He doesn't quite get there, but I personally appreciate the effort, right? And I think that we do see some progression, right? Some measure of character growth throughout the film. Maybe certain moments felt a little sudden, but his character was consistent enough for me that whenever he made a decision, I more or less understood where it was coming from. Does that make sense?
Yes, I will fully agree with you that this movie had better characterization of the characters. Like we knew who they were from the beginning. We knew that this Joe, his friend Patrick, they hated their parents, not because their parents had done them some great disservice in the world, but because they were clearly uncomfortable in their own skin. They were uncomfortable at school. They were teenagers going through puberty. So it's not like their parents beat them. It's more that they were, anyone who's gone through puberty knows what it's like to be like, like everything seems like the biggest deal in the world. Every single girl that looks at me, every single grade I get, everything feels horrible. So anything my parents do also feels horrible. So I felt like I understood where Joe's character was the whole time, where it's coming from. But I don't feel like they gave us any moments of relating, or not relating, but empathy towards the character. Like I wish, like it's fine to have a shit character. It's fine to have Joe, who's this class. He's not a class clown, but this kid who likes to get up to trouble. He likes defying the big man. He likes giving the middle finger to authority. I'm fine with that. But I wish we had moments where I feel like we saw breaking in that facade. And I feel like we didn't. I feel like it was only ever really selfish, isolated moments. Like if he was alone and reflecting, they felt very selfish. And they never gave you a reason to like him. And that's hard when you have a main character.
I feel like there were some moments of vulnerability and softness when he was interacting with his sister. Would you say that?
I don't. I was telling Jeffrey this before we started the podcast. I am someone, for better or for worse, I can get things stuck in my head. So I feel like if a character comes across a certain way, I can just have it stuck in my head for the rest of the movie, even if it's not true. I just feel like, it's like they did a good job of the characterization of Joe, that he is a little shit and he is angry and he is annoying and he came across as very prideful to me. And again, I love the idea that all of this is coding over the fact that he lost his mother and doesn't know how to express that. I love that idea. But they never dove into that enough. We never got into that story. We never got any character development, any realization of like, actually, I am going to be better and I am suffering from the loss of my mother, but I can overcome it. We never got that. And so the very few scenes, quite literally the two we get with the sister, were heartwarming in the sense of like the older sister played by Alison Brie. You get the fact that they're both like, yeah, dad kind of sucks, but at least we have each other. But he still just annoyed me. Even in those scenes, I still felt like he's a little twerp that just is just frustrating.
That's fair. I think that his rule breaking, his contrarian nature, it does good things for some of the characters around him, though, and then it pushes Patrick out of his comfort zone, and Biagio is just his own thing. Um, I was thinking about, I was reflecting on, well, if coming of age is about transition, right, in adolescence, what do these characters transition from and to? With Patrick, he has this unnatural, it's not unnatural, it's just this vehement, quote unquote, hatred for his parents, right? Speaking very brashly about them, and they're not terrible at all. They're just kind of obnoxious, right? But they clearly love him a lot. And that annoys him to death. And then by the end of the movie, right, they're checking in on him after he's returned home, and he's smiling, and he now accepts, yeah, I mean, I do love them. I was a little harsh, right? And then um, in Joe's case, his arc is he's trying to figure out like what it means to be a man, and he's taking steps towards becoming a man, right? And by the end of the movie, he isn't a man yet, but he's becoming one. And that's his arc. Biagio,
We love Biagio. We stand for Biagio.
we do.
We're doing this podcast for Biagio. Uh,
Okay, a quick question. This serious question, right?
yeah.
Who had the more shell-shocked face? Biagio hugging that tree, or the kid from Come and See?
Oh no! I kid you not, Jeffrey. When there's the shot of Biagio hugging the tree, I, honest to God, thought of the kid from Come and See.
Yeah,
I was like, holy cow, he looks like the kid from Come and See.
His eyes were hollow. There was nothing behind there. I genuinely thought he was dead for a moment.
Phenomenal actor. He by far my favorite part of the movie. To give people context, The Kings of Summer did something I really did like that they did was balancing the tone of absurdist humor. It wasn't quite absurdist humor, but I'll give you some examples in a minute. But some really wonky humor with some really down to earth isn't correct, but some really realistic portrayals of what it's like to come from a broken family, whether it's from divorce or death or something else, and the angst when you're dealing with it, and the depression and the stress and anxiety. They did a great job of balancing this tight walk of these tones. And so Patrick and Joe, it's your classic childhood best friend. You know, the movie doesn't need a third character. They've been childhood best friends forever. They're always getting into shenanigans. They both hate their parents. They're going to run off into the woods. They're going to build the tree hut. Well, guess what? Biagio is some random ass kid who is just there. He just shows up and he's insane. He's like Italian ? But he just says the most absurd things ever. And at first you think, oh, he's just going to be a comic relief character. He's just going to be dumb. But he actually ends up being really endearing. So a lot of the humor comes through Biagio's really off-putting weird things he says. But at the end of the day, he loves his two friends that he's made because it's very clear that he doesn't have any other friends. And so these two people, they go out into the woods and they're like, you know what? We got no one else. We're out here. Biagio, come with us. And at first you can probably tell it's like a joke, like whatever, he's here. But Patrick and Joe, by the end of the movie, he proves his friendship, and we'll get into that. But something I also want to talk about, rewinding for a second, something that I love that I thought this movie did really interesting was just, again, walking the tightrope of those two tones, the humor and the realism. And I don't think you have to look past Joe and his father, Frank, and then Patrick and his two parents. Joe and Frank, it's like the most realistic, like almost domestic violence. They're screaming at each other, calling the cops on each other. Like they seem like they hate each other's guts. It was really realistic. It felt real. If you ever grew up in an unsafe home, I feel like you could relate to that. And then you cut over to Patrick and his parents. And Patrick is like using hedge clippers to cut like some shrubs. And his parents are in the background like, you know, you're not wearing the polo that we set out on your bed for you to wear. It has a nicer pocket. Why aren't you wearing that? And then we just push in on Patrick's face as he's just like dumbfounded. And they do like the slow motion with the voices kind of like echoing in the background, like he hates his life. So two genuine reasons to maybe have some like discomfort or frustration at your parents, like the overbearing parents versus the parents that's screaming at you. But I just love how they showed both sides, and one was kind of funny and one was very serious. How did you feel? Did you feel the humor helped the movie, or did you feel like it detracted and was like, whoa, this feels out of left field?
No, I mean, it felt natural. It felt good. I mean, that's the thing about humor is it occurs in everyday life, right? We don't have to force it for it to happen. It just happens in the course of conversation, and it happened in the course of this movie organically. It felt. Regarding Patrick's parents, I'm with them on the soup discussion, right? They make him a vegetable soup. And he's like, I don't like vegetable soup. And they're like, who doesn't like vegetable soup? And I'm in that camp. It's like, it's vegetable soup, right? Don't complain. They made it for you. Like, you just eat the damn soup.
I'm unfortunately in Patrick's shoes. I don't like vegetable soup.
No, but if your mom made it for you, like, would you not eat it?
No, I would not eat it. I don't want to eat something I don't like. I remember one time, small, I'm going to call it antidote because I can never pronounce the correct word for a short story. What is it?
Anecdote.
Anecdote. And ick. I always forget the ick. Anecdote. I was at my grandparents one time. I was like 10, 8, 7, who knows. And my grandmother made something related to like vegetable soup, some type of gross soup. And I didn't want to eat it. So I went to the pantry and found Chef Boyardee and I made that. And then my grandpa pulled me aside and said, that's really disrespectful and you should never do that. When people make you food, you should eat it. I remember that to this day. You know, if I go to someone's house, or I guess if we didn't really sit down as kids as at the dinner table as kids though. So I feel like if I went home, let's say I go home for Christmas break and my mom made vegetable soup, I don't know, maybe I would pick at it if it wasn't. I don't like chunky tomatoes, which I often find is in vegetable soup. I also don't like soup very much. You know what? I don't know why I'm trying to defend myself to you, Jeffrey. I don't like soup very much.
It's so fair. Well, they gave him vegetable soup and they tossed a whole tomato at him.
They did. You know what, Jeffrey? You know what I ate for dinner?
What?
I ate 2 different kinds of soup. Mostly because I'm sick and we have no groceries, so my wife picked me up to canned chicken noodle soup, and canned clam chowder, and that's what I had for dinner. And it was good. It was good.
You just got to give it a chance. You got to give it a shot.
That's fair. But all that to be said, I think Biagio was comedic gold. Everything that came out of his mouth, somehow just the weird, and I think it's because going back to, this is a coming of age movie. Biagio was a band kid on steroids. So I think while Biagio was really, really weird, I think we knew kids kind of like that. Like, can you testify when you're in high school, like 13 to kind of 18, 17? Did you kind of know kids like Biagio?
Nathaniel, I was that kid Biagio.
Really?
No, I mean, well, I was very strange for a bit, and then I just shut up for like a few years. And then gradually broke out of my shell again. And now I'm more Biagio on the inside, right? I let him out in moments of duress. That's not right. I let him out every now and then.
That's fair. What's your favorite Biagio moment in the movie?
It might be him hugging that tree, or no.
It was a great moment. I give context for the audience.
Yeah. So Patrick is at the shed, and Joe is not there. He's just sort of messing around, but he's like scanning the tree line, right? Because he feels that he's being watched. And sure enough, Biagio's there. And this poor attempt at camouflage, he's just hugging a massive tree. And he's staring at Joe with Patrick, with these dead eyes, hollow eyes. And again, I thought he was dead. I thought that he was dead for a few moments. I thought this movie was taking a turn like that, right? Which you have a bunch of teens and they're going into the woods unsupervised and there are snakes out there. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised, right? But he was just being Biagio. But later we find out that Biagio is actually gay. And by gay, we mean that he has cystic fibrosis.
I think that's the most absurd moment in the movie. It's maybe not the funniest. It's definitely one of them, but it's probably the most absurd. Where
it's like, how could you? How could you switch those up?
It's because Joe, at this point in the movie, about the first act, it's kind of Joe getting fed up with his dad and convincing Patrick to go join him in the woods. So the first act is them kind of going to school, getting angry at their parents, and they say, screw this. They go into the woods. The second act is about them just living life in the woods. They're becoming their own men, Patrick, Joe, and Biagio. And this kind of happens into the second act, going into the third act, where they've set up their camp. They've been living there for a few weeks. They got it all figured out. They go to the grocery store to get chicken, and then they just like swim in the river and screw around, and they're men of the woods now. And in this time, there is a girl. Of course, there's a girl. This is a coming-of-age movie. Ness had her Shane Topper, and Joe has his Kelly. So Kelly is also another, in my opinion, this was a Patrick and Biagio movie. They're so fun. They're so loving. They're so endearing. You want to know who our main characters are? Joe and Kelly. They suck. They're the worst. So Kelly is the love interest. At the beginning of the movie, she's like probably 16. She's dating some 20-year-old douchebag. He breaks up with her. And then Joe is like still in love with her. So he's like, well, I'm going to invite her to the woods. Nothing's hotter than inviting a woman out into the middle of nowhere in the middle of night. That's what you should not do, folks out there. If you're a young child about to go through puberty, do not invite women into the woods, into the house that you have made. Danky, soggy wood. You'll go to jail. But so he invites Kelly out to the woods, and he's like, whatever you do, don't tell anyone about this. Cut to, Kelly invites 2 other people, and Joe doesn't say anything about it because he's a pussy, and he's not going to do anything about it.
I did have that thought. I thought that they would make more of an argument with that.
Yeah, but he's like, it's Kelly, so it's fine. But the point is, so she brings a guy and a girl. They're all hanging out. They're dancing. They're drinking. They're eating pizza. They're having a great time. And now it's nighttime and a campfire. Every teenager knows the campfire is the sexiest place to be. And Joe and Biagio are sitting next to each other. And Joe's like, well, what about that other girl? She's been making eyes at you all night. And then please, Jeffrey, explain what Biagio tells him.
Well, he says, I can't do that, Joe. I'm gay. And then Joe's like, oh, wow. I mean, I didn't know. And he's like, yeah, when the seasons change, my lungs fill with fluid. And then Joe's like, well, no, I think what you're talking about, cystic fibrosis. I don't think that's being gay. And Biagio's like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize. But like, there was precedent. I believed that in the moment he was gay.
Oh, yeah.
Because earlier in the movie, Joe's like, oh, man, don't you want to be manly? And then Biagio says, well, I don't really associate with any particular gender. And he's like, is that a bad thing? And Joe straight up says, kind of.
He replies with, it's not great, Biagio. It's not great. If Biagio is anything, he is non-gender. He's fluid.
Yeah.
And probably asexual too, being old Biagio.
That's what I believe is he's probably asexual.
But also, if you told me this was a movie where these 3 boys ran off to the woods and fell in love with each other, I believe it. The sexual tension between Joe and Patrick, it was palpable in my opinion.
For a second, I honestly believed that maybe when Kelly went on a walk with Patrick, it's not that they were interested in each other, but maybe it was like gay best friend. Patrick's like, oh, Kelly, you don't understand. I'm really in love with Joe, and I'm having a hard time being out here alone with him, right? But it didn't turn out that way.
If they went that route, I think it at least would have been a little more interesting. I'm not saying it needed to go that route, but I think they could have. I think they had laid enough subtlety that they could have been gay together. But that brings me to another point of contention I have with this movie that I want to hear your thoughts on. I thought this is a coming of age movie. It's not necessarily a romance movie. It's not necessarily a buddy best friend movie. It's coming of age. When coming of age there's a lot mixed in. There's love, there's romance, there's your parents, there's your best friends, there's your own internal conflicts. I get there's a lot coming all into it. But to me, I thought this had 3 really great setups for interesting stories. But then I felt like they fumbled the ball and didn't focus on any of the 3, and all 3 ended up being soft climaxes. To me, it was the story between Joe and Kelly. You have your romance. Is Joe going to get with Kelly or is he not? You have the parental issues. Joe and Frank, his father. Okay, they're at each other's throats. They hate each other. There's a death of one of the parents, and they can't rectify it. They don't know how to get back to that loving relationship. And then you have the friendship aspect. You have Joe and Patrick. They've been childhood best friends for a really long time. They're going out into the woods, but tensions build over time, especially when Kelly, who kind of sucks, falls in love with Patrick. And she knows Joe loves him. And I'm not saying therefore it's her job to babysit and coddle Joe's feelings, but for her to kind of just like flaunt it around, not great on her part. But the point of the story is there's those 3 story arcs. I'm not saying you have to kill 2 of them. Like last week we talked with Dear Lemon Lima, how we personally felt like you should kill the Hercule suicide story arc because it didn't feel like it fit the story or the tone, and it detracted from our main character story progression. I'm not saying we have to cut 1 or 2 or 3 or any of them, but I do feel like they didn't focus on one enough, and then they didn't nail the head in the climax for all 3. All 3 ended up being really ambiguous. Like, he kind of has closure with Kelly for them not being in love. He barely has closure with Patrick after they have their falling out after Patrick and Kelly start dating. And then he vaguely has closure with his dad. I get it's a coming of age story. It's not this picture perfect world where at the end of the movie, rainbows and butterflies. Like life is messy. Life is hard. But do you feel that those 3 story arcs had a good climax, had good closure?
I think it's fine that Joe didn't end up with Kelly. I think that that was where it needed to end. I think that was a moment of growth for him. I do wish that he had apologized for some of the nastier things that he had said to her, like calling her a bitch and a cancer. I don't think he ever apologized for those things. There were no apologies to be had.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm not gonna interrupt you. Just Joe sucks. I'm sorry. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, Joe did not apologize for anything, and that bothers me. And perhaps it's implied, like a silent sort of apology that macho men that aren't able to express their feelings afford one another through just a glance, right? And so, like, in that sense, his arc didn't feel entirely complete. And I think where they really dropped the ball was in like his relationship with his father and their reconciliation. We didn't really see him reflecting on his relationship with his father in the woods. We didn't really see the steps that led him to reconsider. Well, maybe I have been unfair to him. Maybe I should like take him more seriously. Maybe I should rely on him more. And that's one of the more interesting themes of the movie, right? Because yes, his dad is emotionally distant. And yes, he gets angry and he yells, but it's also clear that he's not the worst father, right? That one could have. He's not a bad person through and through. In fact, they do show that Joe and his dad are similar, right? And their sarcasm and their like desire to be like masculine and do masculine things, messing with tools, and we see Joe throughout the movie trying to emulate his father in being a man, right? It's his constant refrain is this is what a man does, but we see no resolution to that, save for their brief curt conversation at the end where nothing really is said. Maybe they rely too heavily on subtext
Thank you. You nailed it right there on the head. They relied too much on subtext.
because like you can read the subtext, it's there, right? But it's also very slight. And since this is a movie, I would like to see more.
It wasn't satisfying enough. You know, something we're taught in film, and most people probably know this saying, it's show, don't tell. It's better filmmaking to show something rather than just verbatimly showing it. And subtext that often can be the case where you can show it and you can interpret it without necessarily saying it. But this movie, and so subtext is a good thing, but it just, there's a little more that could have been said or shown or some conflict that could have been, it could have come to a head with some type of resolution. Again, they don't need to end the movie with the dad and the son being best friends, but they didn't come to necessarily a resolution.
It was believable. It was not satisfying.
Yeah, I think that is a great way of saying how this movie ended. And another way of looking at it, well, this is just a random thought I want to say really quick. A type of subgenre that I'm really starting to enjoy, and I think it's probably because more recently I've become a husband, and I'm sure it'll be even more so when I become a father. It's just going to sound weird. When they tackle the idea of a parent changing after a death, obviously it sounds weird to say, oh, I enjoy that as a husband, I'll enjoy that as a father. I hope I don't die anytime soon, or my wife. But the point is, now that I am that thing, I can start to put myself and relate to that aspect more in life. Where like you could be the most loving husband or wife to your children, but if not saying this happens all the time, but I can understand if you lose that person, that partner, you can become depressed. You can become angry. The person that you used to love the most, like your child, now reminds you of the person you also love the most that's gone. I think that's just really interesting, and it's a really sad thing that happens every single day. So it's just a really cool storytelling component that you don't see very often. And I feel like it's squandered with the dad because I wanted some type of rising above his circumstances. I wanted the dad, yeah, I loved where he began. He was hurting. He was just kind of a man's man. The wife kind of he even had a conversation in the middle of the movie where he was talking to another person. He's like, yeah, my wife got my son. I don't know how to get him. Like so the wife did kind of the parenting in that regard. So I'm fine with where Frank started. But I wanted to not only see character growth with Joe, but I wanted to see character growth with Frank. And again, we get that. Like Jeffrey said, we get it, but it's not satisfying.
Yeah, why was he only able to have that conversation with the other dad and not with the son, right?
Yeah.
That's what we were all waiting for.
Yeah, like a genuine heart-to-heart conversation. But instead, we kind of get like a pat on the shoulder of kind of a nod to like, I'll do better, but
You did
not
good, son,
really.
right? Yeah.
And also the fact there was no confrontation or repercussions for Joe running away. Granted, I know the movie kind of ends after spoiler alerts, Biagio goes to the hospital for getting bit by the snake. So like that's kind of the focus. I'm not going to chew you out for running away because right now there's a kid dying in my backseat. But there was never any conflict about like Joe didn't have to pay for being a little twerp. And to move the conversation onto the relationship between Patrick and Joe, because we talked about Kelly and his and how they didn't have a resolution, and then how him and his dad Frank don't have a resolution. I feel like the worst part of the movie was him and Patrick barely have a making up. Now, granted, I do think this is accurate for how boys, and especially people their age, can kind of work, how they make up, which I'll talk about in a sec, but it still wasn't satisfying. Even though it worked, it wasn't satisfying. So Patrick and Joe, best of friends, they go into the woods, they build this house. I like it because Joe is the scrawnier, less attractive one. Patrick is the fitter, more attractive one, but Patrick is the one who has more of a, what's the term where people have, not germaphobe, but they have a fear of getting sick? Anemophobic or something like
I
that?
think it's like a hypochondriac.
Yeah. Patrick seems like a hypochondriac. He has a broken foot, so he's kind of like waddling everywhere he goes, but he doesn't want anything to get dirty. He's afraid that snakes and mice will come into their house and bite them. And he's just kind of more prissy and prancy.
He's
Even
more
though he's more
responsible.
rugged and hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and more responsible. And Joe is more scrawny, but he's more desperate to prove himself as a man. And so he's like, no, I am a man.
Yeah, and it comes into play where, when Joe tosses the chicken leg on the ground, Patrick's like, no, like, don't throw your meat out, throw it into the fire. Otherwise, animals like copperheads are going to come to the camp. Fast forward to much later, after Joe is finished carving up and cooking that bunny rabbit, he just throws the head like into the woods. And sure enough, very close after that, the copperhead comes into the shed.
Yeah, good use of setups and payoffs. But again, we're trying to learn from our mistakes. We're not trying to harp on hating the movie like we did with Dear Lemon Lima. But just another characterization of Joe being a dick. Of like, I get what you're trying to do. Joe wants to desperately not be controlled by anyone, so he's not even going to be controlled by Patrick. You tell me to do this, I'm going to do the opposite. I get it. But you got to do something. You got to give me some reason to like you, Joe. We got to have some moment of you like crying in the night because your mother passed away. And it's just, no, you're always a dick.
No, I think that we see him mourning once he realizes, oh, like Kelly isn't into me. She's into Patrick, right? And later he's an asshole about it. But at first he's genuinely trying to process it. And he's taking time away and he's letting them hang out, just the two of them. And also, I think that we see his positive sides in that very scene where he tosses the bunny head like away from him and not in the fire. In that he is very resourceful, right? And he's a go-getter. He is looking through that book and he's finding out, okay, this is how I survive in the wild. This is how I carve up this bunny rabbit. I don't know if Patrick would have done the same.
Yeah. That's an interesting montage that I want to get to at the end when like our hero enters the valley of death. Again, always misquoting that line, but that's what I'm going to call it. His darkest moment where all has failed him. And he goes on this montage of being a man in the woods and he kills a bunny. He kills his innocence and has to skin it. We'll get into that in a bit. But the point I was trying to make was Patrick and Joe have this friendship that I really enjoyed watching. Again, Patrick more of a worrywart, Joe more of like the go-getter, and he's not afraid of getting into trouble. And so I really appreciate watching their friendship blossom as they made this shed, they made their own little life out in the woods. But then they had a very understandable falling out. Again, Kelly comes to the hut. She, quote unquote, falls in love with Patrick. They start, quote unquote, dating in the woods. And Joe becomes a little like emo boy sulking around. And it finally culminates in this Monopoly game. Also, great use of the Monopoly game. It was a good thread between, because the Monopoly game was played with the father, Frank, at the beginning of the game, and Frank was very domineering, manipulative, and like, this is what it means to be a man. You're not compassionate. You win no matter what. And then we see Joe doing the same thing. He's like, this is what it means to be a man. I'm going to win no matter what. But basically, Joe and Patrick get into this big argument over Monopoly. The most realistic part about the whole movie was that Monopoly game. But the point is, they have a complete falling out. Patrick leaves. He says, screw you. That's it. We basically don't see Patrick for the rest of the movie. This happens with maybe 25, 30 minutes of the movie left. A majority of the movie is about Patrick and Joe. And Joe basically cusses out his girlfriend, stomps on Patrick's broken foot and tells him to get the hell out of here. A- And that's like how we end the movie with their relationship. The only, we get what the director was trying to do with subtlety, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough just with that bit of subtlety at literally the last like 2 shots of the movie. Confrontation, air quotes, has been resolved. Air quotes, because it's not really. And we see Joe in the backseat of his car with his dad, and we see Patrick in the backseat of the car with his parents, and they're leaving the hospital. And they're at a red light. And Joe and Patrick are looking at each other, and Joe flips off Patrick, and then Patrick flips off Joe, and they both kind of smile and smirk, and the cars drive off. I think that's a really nice moment of subtext. I think that's a really nice moment of character development. But it can't be your climax. They left on way too hot of a point of cussing each other out and saying screw each other. They have no interaction, and then that's their only interaction point. It just felt like a blow to the balls, and it didn't feel like a good resolution for these characters. It could have maybe been the beginning of their healing, and then we get more, but it couldn't just have been the end.
No, I agree. I feel that I could definitely see them blowing up again at each other like 3 days after the end of this movie, right? Because so much was left unresolved. I wish that we had seen them like hash out their specific grievances in a more explicit manner. And maybe I'll get some flack for that. It's like, oh, like you don't appreciate subtlety. But in this case, it just wasn't satisfying.
That's a really smart way. Again, I'm just praising you for that. Subtlety, that's not satisfying. You can have subtle things. It doesn't make them good. Just because you have a slow, artsy movie doesn't make it great. And not to say The Kings of Summer was that, but just to give a metaphor. But anyways, those are my main issues with the movie. I think, like I said at the beginning of the movie, there was a lot of gold strewn throughout this movie. In my opinion, more than Dear Lemon Lima. I do think Dear Lemon Lima had a much more interesting tone and almost directing style and definitely visual style. But I think overall, Dear Lemon Lima struggled way too much with the cohesive character development, setup, and payoffs, where this movie had it. Maybe I didn't love the character arcs, and maybe I didn't always love how the final payoffs happened, but I feel like they were all set up and they did pay off, even if they weren't phenomenal. For you, Jeffrey, if we are comparing it to the issues Dear Lemon Lima had, what was the best setup and payoffs you felt like this movie had, and what was the best character development you thought this movie had?
Best setups and payoffs. Well, I think that the copperhead comment that Patrick made with Joe throwing the chicken beside the fire, not in it, set up that last moment very well. As soon as I saw him throw that bunny head into the wilderness, I thought to myself, oh no, like we're going to see the copperhead soon. Likewise, the Monopoly scene, right? We're showing how the sins of the father fall upon the son, right? Like father, like son, birds of a feather flock very apart because they get on each other's nerves. Those were good moments of setup and payoff, and also, oh, this is one that is easy to overlook. But when Kelly and Joe are talking after they've made their trek to the woods and have built that house, she's asking after Patrick in a very subtle way. It's like, oh, like does Patrick have a beard now, right? And Joe doesn't think anything of it. He's like, oh yeah, I mean he has a beard. It's a little more full than mine. Mine is kind of thin, right? And then he moves on. But I think when she asked that question, that thought was put in my brain of, oh, I wonder if she's interested in Patrick. And sure enough, Patrick was the one that she was interested in. Do you think that there was ever a point, though, where Kelly was interested in Joe?
Uh, I mean, if you want to read into it a million ways from Wednesday, maybe. But no, I don't personally feel like she was ever interested. And again, Kelly does have the moment at the end where she's like, hey, I'm not trying to come in between best friends. I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings. I'm not trying to create drama to create drama. So I don't think she was intentionally a sucky person.
Yeah.
But I do think Kelly makes not great decisions. At the beginning of the movie, we see she's clearly dating not a very good guy. He's drinking a bunch. He probably clearly only likes her for her attractiveness. He doesn't seem like a high quality person. And
Yeah.
then again, I'm not saying she can't date who she wants to date, but I feel like she should have had a little more forward thinking. Oh, hey, if I date Patrick, this is going to lead to some bad things. I should at least have a conversation beforehand. So no, I don't ever saw that she liked Joe. And I feel like she even said that at the end of the movie. She's like, just because I don't love you romantically doesn't mean I don't have love for you. And I feel like the beginning of the movie, we always saw that. The very beginning of the movie, he shows up to school, some bully steals his shirt, and she immediately gives him a shirt. I feel like she's always had a love for Joe as like a brother sister type love. I never saw it turn into a romantic type love.
Oh, for sure. Like it's clear that Kelly has a great deal of love and respect and trust in Joe, such that like after her breakup with her boyfriend, she calls him. Right. That's what she was prepping to tell him, is that, oh, things with Paul aren't going well. That's before Joe's dad walks in, grabs the phone, and then tells her that he's grounded, going to bed at 7:30. But yeah, I think that she doesn't make the wisest of decisions, which can be forgiven in a pubescent teen.
hmm And she apologizes. She comes to him, and again, she technically wasn't very in the wrong. Joe was in the wrong with how he handled
He
that
was,
situation.
yes, like calling her a cancer, calling her a bitch.
Yeah. She profusely apologizes, and you know what he does with that apology? She gets him a letter. She writes a nice thing on it. She's like, "I'm so sorry for coming in between your friend. I never wanted to hurt you." And his response was like, I know it was like maybe a joke to deflate the situation, but it came again like a prick. He was like, "Oh, you couldn't get a card that said I saved you from a copperhead and from a horrible death. You're welcome." Like I don't. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I'm like, you're being such a twat right now.
And he didn't apologize. Why did she
Yeah, and then
apologize?
he didn't
Why didn't he
apologize.
apologize?
He didn't apologize to Kelly. He didn't apologize to the dad for running away. He didn't apologize to Patrick for literally stomping on his broken toe and kicking him out of the house in the raining woods in the middle of the night. Just like, you can have unlikable characters, but if they're your main character, they have to become likable. Unless you're doing a very specific type of movie, which this movie was not doing.
No, I think that's where you and I are different in that. Like, I didn't completely dislike Joe. I think I did enjoy Joe, but he was grating from time to time. And I don't think that his story ended on a particularly flattering note to him.
You know what it was? The beginning of the movie, didn't love him, didn't hate him. Middle of the movie, getting ready for Kelly to come over. You know, all the boys have grown a little bit of scruff on their neck, their chin, and their faces. But Joe's like, oh my goodness, I have a girl coming over. I better make myself as tractable as possible. And he decides to shave off everything but his little puberty mustache, his little scraggly mustache, and it made him only more beatable. You wanted to beat him.
Haven't we all done that? Like in high school, we're growing out our peach fuzz and we're proud of our peach fuzz. And we're like, I'm going to sport a mustache for a few days. That was me. That was me.
As an Asian, Jeffrey, no, I've never done that because I cannot to this day grow a mustache. So you can grow like a whole beard in like a week or two. I can't grow anything in like a month or two.
Well, I've seen you with facial hair though, right? I think it's like a little goatee.
I have the worst version of facial hair because I either A, would want it to grow all the way in, so at least I could do something if I wanted to, or B, it never grows in. It grows into its full length within 3 days, but then that full length is like just enough peach fuzz to be obvious, but like not look good. Like it won't grow longer if I wait longer. Like I've gone 3 months, probably the longest, and it doesn't get much longer than after 3 days. And so it's just annoying. So therefore, I just have to shave every day with no potential of it being facial hair.
Yeah. Also, unrelated to anything, but related to the idea of facial hair for reasons that you don't know yet. We did not watch Hot Rod together. I'm pretty sure we watched Palm Springs.
Jeffrey, I'm going to have to come to your house and beat you. We watched Hot Rod. How do you not remember? Hot Rod has Adam Sandler in it.
Not
and
Adam
it's
Sandler.
the one. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Not Adam
Andy
Sandler.
Samberg.
Andy Samberg. Their names are so close in my mind. Andy Samberg, where he has to ride on the bike because he wants to beat up his own father to cure his cancer or whatever. We watched it in that room with you, Corinne, and Merritt, and maybe Maximus. Do you remember the night we all stayed at your house and then we went to Food City and got cake at like 1 a.m.?
Yeah.
You remember that? I bought your cake.
Yeah.
It was that night. We watched the movie and then went to Food City directly afterwards. I promise.
Okay, yeah, we watched Hot Rod.
After this, text Corinne. If you don't believe me, text our friend Corinne.
No, I think you're right.
To all those at home, go bully Jeffrey. Go email Jeffrey at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com telling him we watched this movie together. Because we have. And he just hates me.
That memory was excised from my brain. Some alien abducted me and thought, oh, this is the memory that we need to take. He doesn't need it.
Well, hey, it's a great movie, so I'm willing to rewatch it. We'll put it on the season next year.
Sweet.
Maybe. Or, yeah. But all that being said, another question I had for you. Sometimes I feel like as filmmakers, people who love film, who are pursuing film, we don't lean into it enough on what we do. And so I know this also can be a hard one just thrown at you, but what was your favorite performance, moment of performance? And more than that, because I've asked you this question before. I don't know a lot about acting. I don't, I've not tried to become an actor. I know a bit about acting through the lens of directing, but is there something you can give us as an actor that you found particularly interesting that maybe us as the audience wouldn't pick up on?
I think that Patrick and Joe had great acting chemistry. And I feel like when you're casting a movie like this, you are casting for the chemistry. Because if you have three boys that are all phenomenal actors, but they don't work well together, you can't have this kind of story work. And thankfully, I think that these boys play very well off of each other. Patrick and Joe, best friends, very close. They have good banter. Biagio is just a weirdo. He's a good character actor. I can't wait to see what that kid does in the future, because he's got a weird face, and I mean that in the best of ways.
Yeah, he has he does have a weird face, but I mean, like I favorite performance of the movie.
Yeah,
Loved watching him.
it's like Jesse Plemons. He's the redhead that plays the Texas Ranger in Killers of the Flower Moon. He's a character actor, but like he's incredible at what he does, and I could see this kid being that.
Yeah, I think he'll do well. It reminds me of another character. For the life of me, I can't remember. And for some reason, the only role I can think of him in, even though I've seen him in a bunch of stuff, is the. Have you seen Eternals?
I have not. No, I've seen Shang Chi.
Okay, have you seen The Green Knight?
The Green Knight. Yeah, I have.
Okay. Oh, if you're about to say you hadn't, I was like, we are putting that on next year's or next season's watch list. I actually almost put that on for movies I think my co-host would like, but I was 90% sure you had seen it already. He is the character, a very small role when Sir Gawain first leaves the castle and then he's like in the woods and there's that guy that tries to trick him or swindle him, kind of a young boy. Do you remember
Hmm.
that? Do you remember that character
Vaguely.
at all? He has a very particular face that isn't necessarily very attractive. There's something going on weird about his nose or his eyes, but he's cast in a lot of big things. And so all I'm trying to say is like, I hope the actor who played Biagio goes on to do many things like him, because we don't all have to be the most stereotypical Ryan Gosling looking people.
And I hope to high heaven that Biagio's actor never watches this episode.
Oh, come on. It's not I think like I
It's
said,
not a diss.
he's an
It's not.
actor. He should hear us as we say he was the best performance in this movie.
But like I'm imagining if I were just scrolling through YouTube, right? And I find this podcast episode about a movie that I was in. And then the co-hosts are just saying, "Oh yeah, I mean, wasn't it great how weird he looked? Yeah, it really served the story. He just looks so fucking weird. I hope he plays more weird-looking people in other movies because he did it so well."
Are you kidding me? I would feel so complimented. I hope someone goes and watches the movie The Good People of Orphan Ridge and it's like, that Day guy. That also, I said Day because my character's name was Day. I could hear people thinking I said that gay guy.
Oh, for
anyways,
sure.
anyways, I move on. Oh, okay. So the chemistry. How do you, as an actor, get that chemistry?
In some cases, it's just like two people work well together, and it's hard to quantify like what that spark is. But if you are listening to the other person, you can't be just waiting to say your lines. You have to be truly and genuinely listening to that other person, reacting to what they say, and that's what creates chemistry. Just like you believe in this person and you have a genuine love for this person, that contributes to chemistry.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm excited as we review more movies for us to dive into our specific niches of what we want to do as filmmakers and talk more about that. And you guys listening, if you want to hear more things like that from us, our personal stories on film sets or things we wrote, directed, acted in, let us know. Like email us at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com and we'll put in more anecdotes and I got it.
Yeah,
Anecdotes of
anecdotes.
those stories and our own
Yeah.
personal history and thoughts on it.
Now, another thing about chemistry, a good thing to foster it is you just have the actors hang out outside of set. You cast the people that have that chemistry from the jump, and then you put them in situations where they're just getting to know each other outside of a filming context. That way they enjoy each other's company, they're comfortable with one another. You got to feel comfortable on set in the shoes that you're putting on for the scene.
I heard in 50 Shades of Grey, they had a really unhealthy sexual relationship outside of, the movie. I feel like that really helped with that chemistry.
That's what you want ideally out of every scene partner is a
Really
really
method
unhealthy
actors.
sexual relationship outside of the professional context.
Yeah, don't even ask how they got the performances in Come and See. 'Cause that too much.
Oh
I mean,
no.
quite literally, like we talked about, the director used like manipulation and like mind wash techniques to get that performance. But anyways, besides the point, one of the last things I wanted to talk about before moving on to our holy moments is the climax of the movie. So at this point, Patrick and Biagio have already left. Joe is kind of like lost his cool. He's breaking down. It's coming to a climax. He's in the woods alone. You get that really cool montage. I thought it was a lot of fun where Joe is in the woods alone. He's hunting. He's killing rabbit. He's almost kind of going insane out in the woods alone. Very similarly, they match cut it to the father Frank being alone. It was kind of eerie and unsettling and also kind of funny. Again, I think they brought the two genres together in a comedic and also in a really realistic with real emotions kind of way, where you have a shot of Joe only able to depend on himself killing this rabbit. But this movie wasn't really him about becoming a man, so it's uncomfortable. He's achieving, in air quotes, the thing he wanted, him being self-sufficient. He killed a rabbit. But at the end of the day, that's not what this movie is really about. It's about opening up and letting other people in. So while he's eating this rabbit, you cut to his father, Frank, unhinging his jaw and eating a giant wonton,
Looks
which is
like
a whole
his
setup.
eyes
of
are
Joe.
wet with tears. It's
Yeah, like
really
he's being
uncomfortable.
tortured. Yeah, which is a whole setup to a joke earlier in the movie that if you want to know about, go watch The Kings of Summer. And so you get this cut back and forth, these match cuts between the two. And then finally it ends with Joe in the cabin, the shelter at night by himself. And the setup Jeffrey talked about earlier, the snake, it appears and it slithers right on up to him and it's watching him. And he's sitting there and he basically realizes as long as I don't show fear or movement, it won't attack me. We cut to the next morning. Kelly brings Frank, the dad, to the house because he's afraid, oh my goodness, he's out there by himself. I know Patrick is back. I know Biagio is back. We need to make sure Joe is okay. They come into the house. Joe's like, don't come in. There's a snake. The snake goes up to Kelly. Joe jumps in front of Kelly to save her, but then Biagio comes in and gives like a whole speech, and then the snake bites him instead. And then they rush him to the hospital. He lives. He doesn't die. Climax of the movie. Before I give you my thoughts, what did you think about specifically the whole snake debacle in the shelter?
Well, I think that it was set up that the Copperhead would play a pivotal part in the story earlier on, first with the Copperhead skin that Patrick found, and then with this comment that, leaving meat around would attract wild animals. So I was expecting the Copperhead. And I think that from a distance, it's a good opportunity for Joe to show that he is taking steps towards becoming a man, right? And being more self-sufficient and able to take care of himself and others in tackling this problem in front of his father, giving him something to be proud of. As for how specifically it went down, I think that Frank, that's the father's name, right?
Yeah. Yep.
He kind of made a fool of himself in that moment. He wasn't useful at all. And I wish that there had been more coordination between them. I wish that it had been more of a, hey, like you do this thing and I'll do this thing. And we're going to work together to figure this out, to find a solution. And then that would have made their reconciliation feel a little more earned. So those are some thoughts that I have.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense. Here's my thought. I thought it was cringy as hell. I literally cringed when I watched this scene. Now, granted, I'm gonna give the movie this benefit of the doubt. Like I said, at the very beginning of the movie, I went home for a wedding this weekend. I was flying home, and I didn't have enough time to watch it when I got back, so I downloaded on my laptop to watch on the airplane. Well, right as I got to that scene, Frank literally burst into the door and said, "I'm here, son." And then Joe's like, "There's a snake." Right as I got to that point, the pilot was like, "Hey, put away your laptops and put all trays in upward motion." So I had to not finish it. So there was a 2-day break in between that moment. So understandably, that's going to mess up with the buildup of that scene. But why I thought it was so cringy. Anyone that's ever gone through puberty, anyone who's been like a teenager, boy or girl, have had different fantasies about different things. But every like teenage boy I feel like I've ever talked to has had the classic fantasy of either standing up to the bully, standing up to the parent that's mean to them, standing up to someone and showing them how powerful they are in front of the girl they love. So in this instance, we actually have a scene like this earlier in the movie. Joe is fantasizing about Kelly in the woods with him. They're about to make out, and then Frank shows up. And Joe is so cool. He's like, ugh, stupid dad, watch this. And then they like have a little scuffle, and Joe bests his dad in front of the girl he loves. Great moment. I'm happy they included it because everyone has those type of thoughts in their mind. This snake climax felt like another one of those like, oh, if there was a girl I loved, there would be a snake. And I could tell her, don't worry. If you don't feel fear, the snake won't hurt you. And then when the snake goes after her, I'll throw myself in front of her, really strong and romantic like. And it just made me so cringy. I didn't like it. And the best part about that scene was the best part of this movie. Say it with me, Jeffrey. Biagio. He shows up when the father's being a pussy. Joe's going to protect Kelly, but at the cost of his own life. But then Biagio shows up with his classic machete he's had the whole movie and then gets bitten. And it's hilarious. And okay, I just needed to know if you felt any level of cringe in that scene like I did, where it was just like, it felt like he was fantasizing about like, I wish he breaks in, that Kelly shows up so I can show her how strong I am against this snake.
It did feel contrived. It really did. Because all of my fantasies growing up were involving self-sacrifice, right? Oh, like, of course I'm going to give up my life to save the ones that I love. Of course I'm going to face off against the villain, and tragically, I will not make it, but I will be remembered as a hero, right? But I mean, and so that snake definitely should have bit her, too. I thought that had happened for a second. She fell over, right? And I thought that she was the one that would be taken to the hospital. And it would also give more stakes to just the idea that they're out in the woods and they've been making it fine so far, but they're not self-sufficient. They're kids. And so now they're reckoning with a very real threat that they don't know how to handle. If she'd been bitten in that moment, that would have driven that home a little more than him throwing himself in front of it, which it just didn't feel realistic to me.
Yeah, it did not feel realistic. I just like to think that snake has taste. And it was like, yeah, all of you guys suck. Ooh, there's a cool looking man, Biagio. I'll bite his leg.
Give me some.
We all wish we could bite Biagio's leg. Yum, 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 yum.
Yum. I love the noises that Biagio made when enticing the snake, and like the way he moved his tongue.
Yeah, it was like he was speaking parcel tongue from Harry Potter. It was amazing. We love Biagio. Yeah. All that being said, that's the movie, The Kings of Summer. That's everything I wanted to talk about. Before we head out, obviously, Jeffrey, what was your holy moment? What was the pinnacle of filmmaking for you with this movie?
Pinnacle of filmmaking for me in this movie. I would say that it's the chemistry of these boys, just seeing them have fun in the woods, making a life for themselves. It was fantasy fulfillment, right? Wish fulfillment. And I could see myself wanting that as a kid. I think I actively wanted that as a kid, right? To just build a life for myself with my friends. Yeah, and so I really liked that chemistry, the three boys together. That would be a holy moment. Maybe the first half of the movie. I think the end kind of dropped the ball, but I think that I had a very strong start.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And yeah, I love the chemistry. I think Patrick and Joe had a real chemistry that had real struggle in it. Again, they failed on the resolution of that struggle, but I thought the struggle was a good, real setup. And then Biagio wasn't just comedic effect. He became very beloved. He was the one that went back and saved Joe. It wasn't Patrick. So Biagio was more than just comedic relief, and I loved him for that. So they all three brought their own thing, and it really worked. My holy moment was gonna be the humor. It was gonna be that when I was typing it out, I was like, I just honestly. Like my favorite part of the film was the humor, Biagio specifically, and then also Patrick just interacting with his parents was hilarious. Just him feeling like he was gonna die at the most mundane things. Put on this shirt, eat this soup, and just I love Patrick. But the thing that was actually probably the most impressive as a filmmaker, the editing in the movie was very hit or miss. Sometimes I was really impressed with what they did, and then sometimes I thought they overdid it, which I think probably strikes me as a really good an editor in the making, an editor who will hone his craft and become really good at what he does, but is still a little messy and sloppy and lets some overuses things. And when I say that, I mean montages, and also flashbacks. The sloppy side was the flashbacks. I feel like the editor relied too heavily on cutting back to the kids being in the woods, having a good old time. Like anytime there's supposed to be some like type of tension, it was like cut back to them being happy in the woods so we can really build up this moment that it's sad they're mad at each other now. And I just think that was very amateurish, really forceful way. Like it felt like manipulative in like its editing tactic. But the ways I think this movie excelled was in its montages. Specifically for me, and this is my holy moment, we have Frank fishing with the other dad, the dad of Patrick, who we don't get the name of. So Frank and the other dad, they're fishing and they're basically having this conversation of like, why did the boys leave us? What did we do so wrong as parents that made them leave? And all while it's going on, we start the montage with Patrick in the woods taking out his violin and playing this very melancholy riff on his violin. And so while the fathers are out there fishing, being like, well, we like to think of us as parents who try, but clearly if our kids hate us so much they want to run away, we're doing something wrong. And then while they're talking, we're getting those bonding moments of Patrick and Joe and Biagio in the woods, specifically Joe and Patrick, though, in the woods, building their relationship, building their bonds. And it ends with this idea of like, you know what? It sucks. We're so scared. But at the end of the day, at least they have each other. If they have each other, hopefully they'll be okay. And we kind of end that montage with the two boys kind of arm in arm together. And I just thought it was really beautiful. Using Patrick's violin, the montage of the boys hanging out, but then also the emotional impact of Frank and the father admitting we're not always the best parents. We know we aren't perfect, but we want what's best for our kids. We hope they're doing okay. And we see they're doing okay because this movie, again, is all about opening up and letting people in to strengthen you. It's not about being a man's man and doing it all alone. And so for me, that's the holy moment.
That is a great holy moment. I think upon reflecting on it more, that moment did impact me as I was watching it. Just the sad violin, and man, I wish I could go back in time and steal it from you. Anyhow, yeah, the thing that I want to say before we end the podcast is just a brief reflection on the coming of age genre, because prior to this podcast beginning, we were talking about it, and you said that maybe you're just not a big fan of coming of age movies. Has this conversation changed that at all, or are you still of that opinion?
I think coming of age movies can be done very well. I'm not going to say I've seen all of them because I have not. This is my big gripe with coming of age movies. And I think it's perfect that we're talking about The Kings of Summer. Coming of age uses the tactic of your own negative and positive experiences of your own coming of age story, but it can dwell so much in the negative to get and elicit a response that sometimes I think it will often forget to then go to the positive, to highlight the resolution of the negative in your own life story. Whether you relate more to the life of the 13-year-old girl in Dear Lemon Lima, Ness, or relate more to Joe or Patrick or Biagio in The Kings of Summer. It's fine for us to relate to the negative. It's fine for us to relate to the bad that happened in our own lives. I think that's great what film is for. But I think the coming of age story can often rely too heavily on focusing on that negative and not always giving us a very satisfying positive ending. And again, not every movie needs a positive ending. Like I don't believe that whatsoever. I like dark endings of films. I love Memento, the movie we reviewed a few weeks ago. But I would say that's overall I just feel like coming of age focuses too much on the negative, annoying parts of human beings, and they don't do a good job of always wrapping it back around to the positive to feel like it had some type of point to it all. And again, not all movies feel that way. Not all coming of age movies, at least, feel that way.
Yeah, no, I understand that a lot. I think we certainly see that a lot in the genre. Watching Dear Lemon Lima and Kings of Summer back to back, it actually makes me want to watch more coming of age, right? The purpose of a coming of age story is to give us a snapshot of adolescence in a state of transition, right? And that makes it a very versatile genre because adolescence is constantly running away from itself, right? Eventually, it's going to breach that threshold into adulthood, but every step along the way is a coming of age story, right? So, a boy's first year of middle school and a girl's last year of high school are both fertile ground for these types of stories. And I find that so interesting as we're watching these kids navigate new challenges and uncomfortable changes, both in themselves and the world around them. I just think there's a lot of ways to tackle that. We see a very specific way of tackling that a lot, right? And that's where it gets a bit tiresome, to your point. But there's one coming of age movie that I'd really like to watch with you, maybe next season. It's called Stand By Me, which is an adaptation from a Stephen King novella, I believe. Yeah, those are just some things I've been thinking about concerning the genre.
Yeah, Stand By Me has also been on my watch list for a long time. Some coming of age movies that I do agree with and agree with that I like. Also, what you just said, Jeffrey, I think was very beautiful. The whole idea of like coming of age is a very fertile ground for so many different types of stories. I think that's the issue with coming of age. Sometimes we almost always focus on the same generic, and I think I wrote this in my notes somewhere. I think coming of age can be so great because you can dive into the very nitty gritty subgenres almost of like the human experience of coming of age. But often I feel like they rely too much on the general. Dear Lemon Lima, oh, your first heartbreak. The Kings of Summer, Overbearing Parents. I'm not saying those are bad stories. You could do every story well, but I just feel like coming of age can be there's more unique stories out there that haven't been told. And I'd be interested to see. Like I want to see a coming of age story that was like, wow, did not know that would be a coming of age story, but that makes sense. Just how like earlier this year we watched Sinners. I feel like Sinners did a really good job of taking two genres that don't normally go together, like Jim Crow era like law mixed with vampires. Really cool. So I'm not just saying mashing two genres together. That's different. But again, I think the coming of age genre is so fertile of ideas and real life stories that we can come up with more interesting stories that I've seen. But the point what I was going to say was the two that I like is Perks of Being a Wallflower and After Sun. Both phenomenal coming of age movies.
Oh, yeah, 100%. We've covered After Sun on the podcast, and that was one of the greater episodes of our early run. I think that got a good bit of engagement. But I think that Avatar: The Last Airbender could be considered a coming of age story, right? In a very broad sense, right? We have Aang, who abandons the air temple because he is a child and he doesn't want to take upon himself the responsibilities of the avatar. And then the rest of the show is him taking on those responsibilities that he had previously abandoned and learning to accept them and grow into the man that he was meant to be.
That's a good point of just there are endless types of coming of age stories. So I'd like to see more. If you guys know of any coming of age stories that would kind of fit what I was talking about, maybe the less obvious type of ones, let us know at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com or any of our platforms on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube. But I think that does it for the Kings of Summer. So without further ado, Jeffrey, how does this compare numerically wise to Dear Lemon Lima? If I remember correctly, you gave this what'd you give Lemon Lima? 2 point?
I think it's a 2.2. I would give this, you know what? I'll give it a 3. I'll give it a 3. Maybe even a 3.2. 3.3. 3.2.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, let's not get too crazy. 3. Let's just
Too
3.
crazy. Okay, 3. I'm giving mine a 2.8. Higher than Dear Lemon Lima, even though the things I did praise for it, I think again, which maybe is my own fault, the fact I couldn't get away from hating our main character really, really drug the movie down for me. But again, golden nuggets throughout the movie. And for that, a 2.8. Well, sweet. Well, let's find out what we're watching next week. We're getting close. Jeffrey only has 2 movies left, and I only have 2 movies left. We're hoping this week for There Will Be Blood.
Yes.
Because what you have There Will Be Blood and Ikuru left.
Well, Ikiru might be Yojimbo since you're doing Fistful of Dollars.
Yes, it all depends on the roles.
All right, I will bring up the wheel. Oh, wait. I just have 2 picks left, right?
Yeah?
Coin flip. Heads is going to be There Will Be Blood, and tails will be Ikiru or Yojimbo. Flip. There Will Be Blood.
There Will Be Blood. All right, that means now on my turn, we have to watch Emmanuel. That's one of my last ones. And then if we watch Emmanuel, then we will do
Yojimbo.
change your Yojimbo to... change Ikaru to Yojimbo.
Yeah.
Because the reason why, folks at home, is because I have 2 movies left, which is a documentary called Emmanuel and then the spaghetti western A Fistful of Dollars. And A Fistful of Dollars was heavily based on, so much to the point that I got sued, based on the movie Yojimbo. So we think it would be fun if they're the same, but only if they're back-to-back, like how this was back-to-back with both of our coming-of-age movies. So we'll find out in 2 weeks. But until then, guys, go watch There Will Be Blood. Jeffrey, what category is this for?
There Will Be Blood is for the category of movies I think my co-host will like.
Oh, high pressure then. This has also been on my watch list forever. I've seen great things about it. Another Paul Thomas Anderson movie, another Daniel Day-Lewis movie. We've done a lot of theirs in the past, so I'm super excited to watch this. But guys, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Holy Moment Podcast. We've loved listening to you guys. If you want to interact with us, go to our TikTok, go to our YouTube, go to our Instagram. You can find us at The Holy Moment Podcast. Like us, subscribe. Oh, you should leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Amazon or Apple Podcasts. That means a lot. It helps people find us. But until next time, go find yourself a friend like Biagio. Find yourself a friend who doesn't know if he's gay. Find yourself a friend who can make loaded baked potatoes in the woods. Just find yourself a good friend and go into the woods and spend the rest of your life there. Until next time, we hope all of you get some lovely rest, and we'll see you in a week.
And stay holy.